Good afternoon and welcome to the Rundown. I am your host, Captivating Christian, and here's some of your top stories for today, the 23rd of October. Trump and Biden fight over the raging virus, climate, and race. And judge drops third-degree murder charges against former officer Derek Chauvin in the George Floyd death, but second-degree murder still remains. And new researchers detail the effect of black tax on African American home ownership. Investigators find a mass grave while searching for a 1921 Tulsa Massacre victims. And Pope Francis calls for same-sex civil union law in new documentary. Let's get to the news. President Donald Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden fought over how to tame the raging coronavirus during the campaign's closing debate, largely shelving the rancor that overshadowed their previous face-off in favor of a more substantive exchange that highlighted their vastly different approaches to the majority of domestic and foreign challenges facing the nation. The president declared that the virus, which killed more than 1,000 Americans on Thursday alone, would go away. However, Joe Biden countered that with saying that the nation was headed towards a dark winter, and anyone who is responsible for that many deaths should not remain as president of these United States. With less than 2 weeks until Election Day, Trump portrayed himself as the same outsider he once pitched 4 years ago, repeatedly saying that he wasn't a politician, while Biden argued that Trump was an incompetent leader of this country facing multiple crises, and tried to tie the connection of what he saw as the president's failures to everyday Americans, especially when it comes to this pandemic. Good afternoon, and once again, welcome to the Rundown. I'm your host, Captivating Christian, and this is the part of the segment where I like to give my personal views on the articles for this afternoon. First off, let me do some house business and say welcome to all new subscribers and viewers of the channel. Hopefully you like, share, and subscribe, and also hit that notification button so you never miss another update of what's going on here at Cap Hill. Secondly, to all of my state reps that are you in the chat, welcome, welcome, welcome. Always a pleasure to see you. So let's get started and have some fun, shall we? All right. So the first item up for bid, of course, is who else or what else but the final debates before the big push towards the election 2020 with your favorite host of characters, our current president, Donald J. Trump, Mr.
Retard alert!
And his opponent, of course, none other than Joe Biden. All right. So, thoughts of how'd it go? The debate, of course, was rife with some of the same lies coming from the current president, and moments, I guess, where Joe kind of struggled to get his words out due to his stutter.
Bruh.
But overall, I mean, they talked about, of course, the coronavirus. They talked about the economy and the lack of leadership, or, let Donald Trump tell it, all of his great accomplishments that he's done. They talked about climate change and all that. But of course, the meat and potatoes of the whole thing, or when they was talking about race.
You freaking psychopath! You're a fucking piece of shit!
because this particular president, President Donald J. Trump,
retard alert,
kept saying that he has done more for African Americans, and the only person that has done the same for African Americans was Abraham Lincoln himself. Now I'm trying to figure out, okay, did you totally must not have taken history class that well to know that even with Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation, which he had to do as a military kind of option in order for them to gain the upper hand in soldier numbers, of course, and for the reason, part of the reason fighting the damn war to begin with. So the people, so slave owners wouldn't be able to use their slaves as, reinforcements for the rebels. So I guess they wanted to hurry up and do that before the rebel states or the Confederate states decided to do that. So it's just that they did a one-up on the Confederates. With that said, it was not an option that President Lincoln at the time really wanted to do, because they didn't feel it was time. It was like, well, what do we do if we have all these slaves running free? What's going to happen to our people? That whole rigmarole. And we can get into that in some other time. But I say all that to say, with LBJ signing the Voting Rights Act, even with Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves, they still didn't have the right to fucking vote. So I don't know where this whole, Abraham Lincoln has done, I've done just as much as Abraham Lincoln. Get the hell out of here. What have you done that somebody else already did, and all you did was continue programs or erase it and put your name on it, but keep it the same? I mean, it's ridiculous. Again, nothing but lies. Did I think it changed the needle too much? No, not really. I think the people that support the president for whatever reason will still support him. And those who do not and finally see the light that at least this president is not president material, not at least for the United States, maybe president of that little penis company he has, but definitely not president of the United States. Maybe they have woken up and smelt the coffee, and maybe that will be a glorious day. But other than that, I think everybody else is still the same, and they know. Why you being a dickhead fool? Stop being a dickhead. So, oh well. A Hennepin County judge has dropped a third-degree murder charge against former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin in the killing of George Floyd, but denied the defendant's motion to dismiss the two other charges against him. Chauvin is still facing the higher charges of the second-degree unintentional murder and second-degree manslaughter charge in George Floyd's death, which was on May 25th, which sparked nationwide protests and a revoking over race and policing this summer. Chauvin, who was released on $1 million bond earlier this month, was seen in videos of the incident kneeling on George Floyd's neck for almost 8 minutes, while the black man told Chauvin and the other 3 officers he could not breathe. In a ruling issued on Wednesday, the judge also denied the motion to dismiss the charges against the 2 other, now former, Minneapolis police officers who had been charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder and aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. A hearing was held on the motions in September, which was the first time all 4 defendants appeared in court together. The judge's ruling states that the jury should decide if the state of Minnesota had proven the guilt of the former officers, writing in a summary that the state has met its burden of probable cause in the charges against the other officers. The exception was the third-degree murder charge against Derek Chauvin. The judge ruled that the charge can be sustained only in a situation in which the defendant's actions were immediately dangerous to other persons and were not specifically directed at a particular person whose death occurred. But the evidence presented by the state does not show that Chauvin's actions were imminently dangerous, and anyone but Floyd, the ruling says. Story. Of course, I always tell you there's always drama around the corner. So back in the news, of course, is former officer Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin was the officer who had his knee on George Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes, 8 to 9 minutes, which caused George Floyd's death. I told you once before that, because of all of the nationwide attention that the death of George Floyd got and the protest and, people wanting to put the officers under a microscope, they had to act quickly to kind of decompress the situation. So they put the officers in jail, but slowly, one by one, they were all being released on bail. Derek Chauvin, who was the last to be released on $1 million bond, finally was released. And of course, this didn't happen until after everybody kind of, went about their merry way to other cases and waiting for the trial date, right? So they quickly kind of did that, and that happened. Then all of a sudden, the defendants wanted to try and push to get their charges dropped, or at least dropped to a certain degree, or dismissed altogether. And that happened back in September when all 4 officers had met together for their first time since the ordeal. The judge wound up dropping the 3rd-degree charge from Derek Chauvin, but however, he is still being charged with the manslaughter, 2nd-degree manslaughter, and 2nd-degree unintentional murder charge, unintentional 2nd-degree murder charge. So we shall see how this turns out. Also, the other co-conspirators or aiders and abettors, the other officers who happen to either be standing around or holding George down while Derek Chauvin was on his neck. Also, their other charges still stand. So we shall see, again, what this means come the trial date. But the judge also did grant the bail, of course, and then the stipulations of the bail was also granted to be changed in fear of the officer's life. So he is able to leave the state as long as he still, shows up for the court when it is time. And I'm not sure if they'll do that virtually or actually in physical court. So again, we shall see what happens with all this. Black Americans are paying more than white Americans to own a home, making it harder for black households to accumulate housing wealth at the same rate as their white counterparts. According to a new research study by MIT, in a study published earlier this month, MIT researchers found that black Americans pay on average $743 more annually than white Americans when it comes to mortgage interest payments, $550 more per year in mortgage insurance premiums, and $390 more each year in property taxes, totaling more than $13,000 over the lifetime of the loan. Citing income data from the National Association of Real Estate brokers and the county's oldest minority trade association. The study said it found an income gap of more than $25,800 between black and white Americans that can be exacerbated by the black tax on home ownership. The elimination of these individual costs, the study said, would cut in half the roughly $130,000 gap in liquid retirement savings between whites and blacks. The studies also found that African Americans paid higher interest rates due to the lack of refinance opportunities, a problem researchers say result in black home ownership paying approximately another $475 per year more than their white homeowners, which results in a loss of retirement savings by nearly $20,000. All right, and here is one thing where, you're kind of not surprised. But, so, MIT, one of the big prestigious Ivy League schools out in Boston, has discovered through research that black home ownership or black homeowners have been paying far more in a lot of things. Everything from more mortgage per year, more insurance, homeowners insurance per year, even more taxes per year, even calling it black tax. That if you took away a lot of these increases that were given to black homeowners and less to their white counterparts, you would close the income gap by $130,000.
Oh, hell no!
Yeah, but we've been whipped into thinking that this is what it is, because a lot of us come into home ownership or any kind of ownership really with not having the tools or taught a lot of the same financial tools as our white counterparts. So a lot of us end up not knowing about these things. And these, kinds of research always bring to light the racial disparities between whites and blacks. So when we always try to talk about, how racism is over and racism doesn't exist anymore and we've plateaued to a different place, I personally think that is all because the reality is you can still pull up documents and show things in which you get to see the different disparities of whites and blacks, and nobody is, even when they discover it, it's not like they're quick to change it and go, okay, no, we'll give you everything that you've been deprived of. Here's an extra $130,000 for your home. So, you're not willing to do it, yet you'll sit there and go, oh yeah, sorry, our bad, but you still will reap the benefits of your trashy mistakes. So I think, and this is another reason why I like to say that, yes, these speak to volumes why reparations are in order, because there are multiple moments where black people have been deprived. And yet when you benefit off of it, all you want is we're sorry, and kind of keep it moving, while the people that you stole it from still end up in the same spaces of trying to catch up. It doesn't make any sense. A mass grave was found this week in the cemetery where archaeologists have been searching for victims of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. An Oklahoma state archaeologist announced on Wednesday the outline of at least 10 coffins were found at the Oak Lawn Cemetery in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the state archaeologist Carrie Steckelbeck said that she had a high degree of confidence that this is one of the locations that we have been looking for. But she also said that investigators are remaining cautious because they have not done anything to expose the human remains. Since the excavation resumes on Monday, archaeologists have found one set of human remains and a possible second set, but investigators have not confirmed whether any of the remains belong to the victims of the 1921 massacre. As many as 300 people were killed in the massacre. The Tulsa Race Riots of 1921, also called the Tulsa Race Massacre, resulted in the death of hundreds of African Americans of the city of Greenwood District, when a black economic hub, also known as Black Wall Street, when a mob of white rioters looted and burned the community. The riots were sparked by a confrontation between a black resident and a white man among a group of angry white men demanding the lynching of a black man. According to historic accounts, a struggle ensued over the white man's gun, and the white man was shot, prompting a mob that stormed the neighborhood. Historians believe that more than 300 people died after more than 1,000 homes were burned and destroyed. At the end of the violence, Black Wall Street was decimated. Historical photos show bodies of black residents lying in the streets. Bodies were buried by strangers in a mass grave, while victims and families were detained under martial law. The University of Michigan historian who worked on the recovery of the Tulsa riots graves for decades said in December that families were never told whether their loved ones died or where they were buried, and there weren't any funerals, he added. And in this next article, the bodies of a lot of the lost members of the 1921 Tulsa Massacre have been discovered by a state archaeologist. So the state archaeologists in Tulsa, Oklahoma have discovered a mass grave, and possibly the graves that they have been looking for many victims from the Tulsa Massacre. They found 10 coffins so far, but have not opened the coffins in fear of endangering the remains of the people inside. They also unearthed 2 more additional coffins, and thinking that this is the exact area where the mass graves were made for victims of the Tulsa Massacre. Now, for those of us who don't know what the Tulsa Massacre is, back in 1921, otherwise known as Black Wall Street, it was a thriving African American economic community that was totally destroyed and decimated, rioted and burned down to the ground by a mob of angry white thugs. Sounds familiar? Right. Something that still goes on today, but they act like they don't know nothing about the history that they've caused. Make it make sense. But, the graves have been unearthed, and it like a start to something that's been erased for so long or not even talked about in American history is now kind of coming back to life. Even the show Lovecraft Country, which is on HBO Max as well as HBO, have scenes depicting the massacre of 1921, which is definitely a great watch. So if you haven't seen it, I suggest you watch it, and it gives you some sort of visual context of little bits and pieces of what happened during that time. Also, The Watchmen, the HBO show Watchmen, which starred Regina King, also talks about the 1921 Tulsa Massacre, otherwise known as the Black Wall Street. So those are definitely things where in which we get to see, like I said, the actual visuals of the kind of torment and torture that we've been put through in this country. And it is definitely something I employ us all to watch and take note of. And I'm glad that these types of stories are being told other than just the slave narratives, but that these type of stories are being told to add on to the level of violence and I want to say terrorism, yes, exact word I was looking for, that we have been put under for so many years. Hey, this is Captivating Christian here to remind you to tune in to Politics and Wellness every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Politics and Wellness every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. And be sure to join Jay Wilson, Rebel Son, The Official King Payne, Conscious TV, and Captivating Christian this and every Thursday at 6:45 Central Standard Time, 7:45 Eastern Standard Time for the Gentleman's Panel, where we are not afraid to go there and discuss an array of topics. See you there. Pope Francis has called for legislation to protect same-sex couples, according to comments he made in a new documentary that mark a break from Catholic doctrine. Homosexuals have a right to be a part of the family. They are children of God and have the right to a family, the Pope said in an interview in the documentary, which premieres on Wednesday at the Rome Film Festival. What we have to create is a civil union law. That way, they are legally covered. Francis noted that he has stood up for civil unions before, but his remarks in the documentary go beyond what he has said previously and sharply deviate from the views of his predecessors. LGBTQ right groups hailed the comments as a major step, but also with conservative religious groups, they raised questions about the context of the quote and delivered in a movie and how much weight the comments held. Before he became the pontiff, the Archbishop of Buenos Aires opposed same-sex marriage legislation, but supported some level of legal protections of the same-sex couples. Alright, now in this last story deals with the church. So, it turns out that in a documentary soon to come out that Pope Francis have basically want to create legislation or want, a lot of the churches, or I guess many of the states or countries around the world, I don't know how, which way it leans, but to create legislation that would honor same-sex unions. That way they have the legal right to be able to adopt and have families, or if, tragedy strikes their relationship, the partner left can decide what form of treatment or final wishes their partner would have liked. Now, this part I definitely agree with. I'm all for making sure on the legal end of things that people have the equal rights. not here to necessarily debate morally what one person thinks or another, because that's not really dealing with law. That's not really how you are supposed to look at things. Legally, it's just about everybody having the equal rights under the law. So if we're going by law, then yes, legislation should be created to where in which everybody would have the equal rights to have a family, civilly be connected, and be protected legally under the law. Now, as far as we can talk all day about morally, how something morally is and what it means to you in ethics wise, but in dealing with the law, it just is like plain black and white. It's either you're protected by the law or you're not. And if everybody in the United States is supposed to be protected under the law, then it's kind of a no-brainer. But of course, people like to kind of put religion in when they feel like it and then take religion out when it doesn't suit them. But we're not a country that basically was supposed to be run under religion, because that is the reason why the United States, why people came from England over here, to one, run away from religious oppression, and two, it was a punishment. So since when did it become one nation totally under God? I have no idea, but that was never the framers' idea of these United States. But however, we're here now, and so it is nice to see that some religious faction of this century is taking a different look at families and communities, because if we are all God's children, then that means we would all be God's children regardless of our sins, right? Right. Once again, thank you for watching CCN Midday News. Hope you enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also hit that notification